Good morning and kia ora. Welcome to Knowledge Exchange 3, Fashion 3.0, It's Sustainable. Before we kick off this morning's live stream, I wanted to welcome you and to acknowledge the beautiful Eora Nation and Gadigal people. I am sitting on Sydney land today on a very different energy than normally broadcasting from Warramai and Port Stephens. I'm grateful for the opportunity to have you all here and joining me, and I wanted to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I'm on and to acknowledge where you are joining me from today as well. I also wanted to say hello and acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island folk that are joining us this morning and pay my respects and say thank you and welcome. Here we are. It is May already, and you may not have realised, but it's already been a month since we last came together. I'm Tracy Hamilton, and I am the AFC FashTech Lab Program Manager, and I'm going to be your host for today's session. Today, we're actually going to be talking again about the awesome program supported by the City of Sydney, hosted by the Australian Fashion Council, where we've brought together City of Sydney fashion brands with some Australian technology companies to really look at how do we build a solution within the connected supply chain that could really deliver both commercial validity and impact through sustainability. And for those of you who may have joined today's stream for the first time, we're on a journey. This is a 6-month program, a pilot program where we're looking at taking these businesses through a step-by-step process of transformation. What does it take to go from an analog to a digitized process? What are the business strategy objectives that you might need to consider if you're going to adopt one? Now, our cohort, both technology and fashion brand partners, have gone through a program with FutureMap to really look at their readiness. And that diagnostic was done back in February. And so with those outputs, they then worked with UTS to lean into what are the capabilities? What are the resources and skills and knowledge I need to actually execute on the future of Fashion 3.0? And then we commenced the journey today, which is technology adoption. And that's been the crux of the last sort of 2 or 3 months, that the fashion brands have been working deeply with our technology companies who have come together to create a connected 3D sampling workflow. And our fashion brands, an incredible cohort this year. I'm so pleased. In our first year, we've got such an amazing spectrum of businesses that have joined us from the City of Sydney. And you'll recognise many of the names on this page. So we've got incredible avant-garde emerging designers all the way through to impressive established designers who have participated, which gives this pilot a real flavour where you've got different fashion frames, you've got different business strategies, different propositions, and it's really helped us thrash out what does a successful workflow look like. And to that point, today we're going to have 2 parts to the session. First part of our live stream today, you're going to meet 2 of our fashion brands who are going to take us through their experience with the program so far and what they've learnt. And then I'm going to open the floor for Q&A because I know you guys love to ask us lots of questions, and I love that too. And then we're going to move into the second part of the stream where we've got a panel. And I am so looking forward to that part of our conversation. So let's open this morning. Thank you for joining us, West 14 and UFM. We have Violetta and Ashley coming today to have a chat. Kia ora. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for spending time with me this morning. Really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on, the program and how you're going. the connected 3D sampling workflow, this was our hypothesis, was that, traditionally there's an analog flow and there's steps and stages that we all go through. And we know that some of the businesses have faced up to 12, 16 weeks in the analog workflow at the top. And our hypothetical journey for the digital workflow was that we could potentially execute in 3 to 6 days at some points. So I'm going to now share some of the materials that Violetta and Ashley have collated as part of their journey through this workflow, and we'll have a chat about how they're feeling and what's going on. Now, before I start, I should ask, were there any expectations that the both of you had when you decided to join the FashTech Lab pilot? Like, what were you thinking? Why did you go, yes, I'm going to have a go at this digital sampling business? Violetta.
Yes. Oh, I think I explained one of the first sessions that I was on is that my head has been so much into the metaverse and being a smaller brand, and how do we create a 3D asset so we can be in a gaming world or whatever the next phase of fashion will be. So that was my starter point. Where we are now in the process, I can see so much opportunity for our business on how do we move to a hybrid model of sampling, and from a sustainability point of view and from a speed to market. So I guess my expectation was, how do I get to the end part? And now I'm really enjoying and learning during the process.
Awesome. And what about you? Thank you, Violetta. And what about you, Ashley?
We've been coming at this from a sustainability perspective. So we are really looking at sustainability across our whole value chain. And then when the FashTech Lab came up, it really has enabled us to deep dive into that sampling section, which is going to be a great way for us to use as a platform to drive both the theoretical as well as the practical framework across the whole value chain, not only to just establish our baseline for sustainability and our current carbon footprint, but also for us to shore up our plan on how we can have a more sustainable entire value chain.
I love that. I will be digging into, I have more questions for you on the value chain proposition and conversation as we go through. If I may, I wanted to be able to give a sneaky peek to those of you watching on the live stream where both these brands are at. And thank you, both of you, for being so generous in sharing your experiences more broadly beyond our cohort. It's awesome to be able to take people through what they're seeing. So first stage of the process, right? This digitization of fabric. So what are we seeing here? I know that learning has been one of the key conversations that we've had around fabric. And again, Violetta, I would love to hear a little bit about your experience around the digitization process of how did you go with getting your fabric up and digitized and in the Bandicoot frame?
Yeah, absolutely. So our brand, we focus specifically on leather and shearling. And so we selected core styles or core leathers that we use throughout most of our collections over the years. This is only leather. And the reason we say only leather is some of the challenges, or I guess some of the issues that we face, is that shearling, which is similar to fur, it has a higher, I guess, 3D feeling to it, isn't an easy fabric to digitize. And so we stuck to our core styles. And some of the, I guess, the things that I haven't seen yet is, how tricky it is to digitize leather swatches that are essentially this small when they need to be a much larger panel. And so as we see when we get to the 3D size of 3D version of our designs, it's how real our leather to the digitized version to real leather. And I think that's probably been the biggest learning, or getting my head around how this actually looks real, if that makes sense.
That's awesome. I mean, I've definitely touched on my own interest around the physics, and Matthew is on today's live, and I'm definitely sure that there'll be some more questions for Bandicoot, but I've loved watching the collaboration as you bring new substrates, new textiles to the table. And it's awesome. This is a pilot program. This is about the collaboration between industry and technology and learning in this journey. So I can see, we're 2 months in, 3 months in, and already the machine learning basis, the way that you guys have cooperated has meant that we now have knowledge about how shearling sits, which might not have been something that we knew last year. And so it's really wonderful. But also, if anyone's listening in on the stream, is to consider, what are my textile choices? How did that impact your process? So if you're saying that your swatches were quite small, what were some of the things how did the Bandicoot team work with you around that opportunity?
To be honest, they did all the work. I just submitted my swatches. I only found out afterwards that they were too small. And for me, it was the hardest thing is that all of our core styles or core leathers are all black. And so the beauty of leather is the grain, the feeling, the material, the weight of it. And so as I was divvying out all the cores, I'm like, this is all black. This is so boring. How will it look in a digital world? So we tried to add some colors in there just to make it more interesting. But I think all the learnings came afterwards when the tech teams were talking and sharing that with me.
Mm-hmm. I think that when we've been talking about the workflow, when it comes to the textile selection and thinking about that fidelity and how many days you might need, these are some of the optimizations. So we're still on our learning path, but it's definitely been an interesting one to talk about, what are the optimum, and then if you're working below optimum with smaller, what does that mean? And when you're talking about certain choice with fabric, again, what are those decisions that you're going to need to make and how it shows up? And it's quite funny when you go, in the metaverse, what role will fabric play and how will that look and feel? What about you, Ashley? How was your digitization experience at this part of the process?
Well, as Violetta said, the team at Bandicoot did all the heavy lifting, which was wonderful. So it was all very seamless for us. I think the powerful thing being an only e-com company, particularly with us as a new brand, and we are doing something that's not quite traditional. So we're designing women's wear in technical fabrics. What that means is a lot of our customers don't really know the touch, the feel, or the look as much. They can't, we don't yet have any brick and mortar stores that someone can come in. So having digital fabrics actually just provides that one additional layer for our customers to get a little bit more of a sense of what a technical fabric is. Wow. The other really incredible benefit, and this is a challenge that we have thrown over to the Bandicoot team, is we had one sample that we wanted in an oyster, in an oyster color, but we could actually only get the sample in black. And of course, going from black to a very light color was quite a challenge. And David, the Bandicoot team, which I'll call to in a little bit, actually converted our black silk into a oyster color. Which is incredible if you think about, challenges in the supply chain of getting the right colorways that you want quickly enough to go through the sampling process. By David's standards, it wasn't actually perfect. So for me, it looked incredible and enough for us to get a gauge on what the style would look like in that colorway, in that fabric. But it's also something that we can perhaps tackle a little bit downstream with ponds as we go into the 3D sampling to just get that color, right on point to the Pantone.
Amazing. It's the magic, right? It's like the internet challenge of what color's the dress, and it's like, what color the dress is. It's oyster. Yeah. I'm just going to jump into some more of the content here with. Obviously those fabrics were then uploaded into the system using the Quadrant by Style Atlas backbone, and that sort of software sits as the structure that guides the entire digital process. It's been one of the interesting points of distinction that I've noticed, which is even from the technology team's perspective, as I listen into their learnings, is that by having that end-to-end backbone, their communication and their handover is getting greater pace. And downstream, remember Pons commenting that she can see what's happening way ahead of time, and she can also jump in. So even when you talk about, you've got someone who's digitizing textiles, And then down here, your end rendering designer going, oh, hey, that they're able to have a conversation because they've got visibility. That connected ecosystem is quite unusual for fashion, from what I understand. We then move into optioning. And so here's some of the optionings and designs for West 14th. And I just wondered, Violetta, with this experience, so from a time saving, like what sort of reduction in the sampling development cycles have you seen?
Yeah. So I guess firstly, we chose styles sorry, I'll come back to your question in a minute, but firstly, we chose styles that were existing styles. And we made that choice as a business to, I guess, train ourselves on being able to compare the real sample, the real patterns to the digital world. So it's an easy way for us to make a comparison and a judgment call on, is this the right solution for us? And is this something that we want to incorporate into our business? And so to go back to your question, which was, sorry, I went on a tangent.
I was curious as to what sort of reduction in the sampling cycle have you seen? Because I was like, when I opened up the materials and I'm like, wow, you've got garments.
Yeah,
that was fast. Yeah.
So I think the longest process probably was us of uploading and creating our tech packs and getting that over to the actual 3D tool stage. So Tula then created our avatars and what we'll see next in our patterns. And it was just training my mind or my brain on seeing a walking avatar. How do you do a fit session? What should I be paying attention to? And that probably took the longest process, is even getting my head around it, because normally we would be having fit sessions with a fit model within our internal team. We'd be trying things on a few times, which you can't actually do that in this environment. So someone else is trying it on, essentially, which is the digital avatar. And literally overnight, Pons has been able to put together our 3D creations to present today. So the process has been very quick. I think the delay has really just been on myself giving back the feedback.
Got it. Interesting. So that's something to consider, is that feedback loop. Now, speaking of toiles and getting the material out, this is always the most exciting part for me, being such a visual person. So Ashley, what are we seeing here? Just going to take you.
We are seeing here, so this is a brand new style. So we launched this year, and this is part of our second collection. We are running obviously 3 styles digitally, and the remaining will be analog. So the fun thing about this style, and this really talks to the case study of digital sampling, is the experimentation that you can actually do so much quicker. This style started as a long sleeve jacket. And the incredible thing is that we used a block based on one of our top selling jackets, because we had customer feedback that they wanted something similar in the same fabric. When we put this through the digital 3D toile, we noticed that the sleeves were actually really, really quite long, which made us realize actually the physical sample is the same. Our sleeves are quite long. And with a bit of experimentation, we went, why don't we just cut the sleeves off? Let's see what a vest looks like. So that was one iteration that we did. And then we actually have saved 3 physical samples. We have changed the lapel size twice, and we have removed darts from the back and added them back in. So with this particular style, we've saved 3 physical samples. And for a jacket, from a sustainability perspective, with some quick rudimentary calcs, that's actually 65 kilograms of carbon saved and 200 litres of water saved.
Wow.
So, not to mention the cost component of us saving 3 by physical samples and months of iterations and development. So this is a really, really great, fun case study for us that points towards the experimentation that you can have and the quick prototyping via digital sampling.
I'm going to just run your little walk. I'm going to run the walkthrough here. Here she goes.
She would obviously be wearing pants, but
she's like Met Gala ready.
She is ready to go.
She's ready to go. She's ready to go. It's awesome. She wants to walk again. She's so excited about walking. And then think Violetta, these beautiful pleats.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, sorry. Just jumping in. I'm so excited. I was just thinking I should have probably had a lot more feedback. You did all those iterations on the changes, Ashley. I wish I did more, but this is one of our best-selling pleated skirts made out of leather. And I guess all the feedback that I had initially was more of I was focusing less on fit, more on the design, like the darts were kind of missing. I found that the hemline was really hard for me to get my head around because this isn't an asymmetrical hemline. It's much more of a uneven hemline. And it was something that we were working on and measuring a number of different times to the patterns to get that right. And then if we go to the next slide, I know you want to do this next, but this morning when I found the 3D, the final version of this skirt, everything looks as the original. So that was really exciting. And one of the things that we noticed in the walk sequence here, the cycle, is that there wasn't enough movement initially, and then we added that into it. So there's a bit more of a drape to it.
I think that's interesting as well when we talk about that technology learning, which is getting the as close to real life experience, which then gives us confidence that our digital model is a practical, solve. Pardon me. That she's going to want to walk twice today. She's just excited about the walk. And so here we're seeing some really beautifully finished work. So this is Pons. So you've come through. You're almost at that final fit and sign off stage.
That's right. And so this was like a present this morning to see this. This is how quickly last night or yesterday afternoon we gave the sign off to move to this last stage. And this is what the creation was, which is amazing. So thank you, Pons. And the hemline is exactly as the original. So that was one of the concerns I had. And clearly, I guess once you put the digital fabric on it and you move to this last stage, then maybe it all comes out correctly, or as I envisioned it to be.
Yeah. And so here we're moving to a second design of pants.
That's right. These are a stretch leather pant. And again, it's one of our signature styles. And we've actually had a few conversations around this, which was actually interesting, around zipper size, back rise, reduction. There's been a few different changes to this pant, even though this is in production and selling really well. So I found that really interesting in this process of getting it on an avatar and getting different perspective on the fit, on the style.
I told you she's going to walk twice today. She's loving the walk. And again,
yeah. And this is just a stretch leather. So I think we can kind of go back to the fabric digitation and have a bit more of a play with it. Maybe this looks real to everyone else, but maybe my eyes are just so used to seeing it in real life that I feel like we can do more to make it feel more like leather, like the real thing. But I think it's a really great start.
Mm-hmm. And so again, these are the sort of turnarounds, and it's been 12, 24 hours if you're lucky. So it's, as I go through this, I can see that everyone is just blown away by the speed that the digital teams are able to turn, or the connected sampling solution, the digital solution, is able to give us that support, just showing everyone what it looks like sitting in the interface. So being able to play and share. So here we are. This is the process that both UFAM and West 14th have gone through together. Key learnings, I'm hearing: preparation, feedback, learning the fidelity around the substrates, working with the technology team and Bandicoot to get the way that the fabric's represented digitally, a little bit about fit and form and understanding once that garment goes on a digital avatar, getting the movement right, subject to how the fabric is, the drape and rise, so all the typical tweaks that you might be making, but you'll probably be doing them to and fro with physical people, right? So with the fit model. So I can certainly hear that we've managed to sort of save time and reduce the sampling cycle. But sustainability, Ashley, Thank you. Thank you for the gift, which is 3 samples. We saved 65 kgs of carbon. You know, we've saved 200 litres of water. We've saved months of backwards and froing. And I know that circularity is going to come up again in future conversations, but the ability to take existing garments and potentially reimagine them. So I'm blown away by the fact that you've actually been able to give us the gift of what does it look like when it comes to the impact on sustainability, and what does that mean to your businesses? Now, I wanted to ask you, when it's come to sustainability and creating these decisions in your business, what has held you back? Like, have there been specific things that have slowed you down, or why now, why today? What's been your experience with adoption of a solution like this in your business? Ashley, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I think how I think about sustainability at UFEM is I think about our beliefs and then I think about the trade-offs. So from a beliefs perspective, we believe it is the creator's responsibility to design with an unwavering fidelity to the garment's potential sustainability. So we believe it is our responsibility to take out as much decision-making as possible for consumers to make more responsible and sustainable clothing. Our second belief is that we believe that sustainability is table stakes. So it's no longer special, but it's absolutely essential for all brands. Then we acknowledge the trade-offs. So there are 2 key trade-offs that we have. One is that responsible design and production is definitely a complex spectrum, and it's a journey. So we are all on this journey, and as we all proceed on this journey independently, we are running in parallel with technology and innovation that is probably today behind what we would want it to be, but we're hoping it'll all catch up. And the second trade-off is we make, from a consumer perspective, every time we survey our customers, we learn that sustainability isn't the number 1 purchasing criteria. It sits around number 5. Whereas for a business, we, would like it to be number 1. So that's a constant trade-off that we're making, that we are waiting for technology and innovation to catch up so we can make the most responsible decision at every point of our value chain. But again, while there's some mismatch between what customers want in solving customer problems, that's kind of where we have to make some, trade-offs and acknowledge that it is a journey.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's very, very thoughtful, and really interesting to hear your experience in regards to waiting for technology to catch up, but also the lagging in the consumer base. Really, really interesting. And we are stewards on behalf of others. This is the responsibility we hold. So I really love your creative vision and your purpose. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Super inspiring. And Violetta, you and I have spoken about sustainability and mission before. How has adoption gone in your business, and how are you feeling with this program and a solution like this in regards to delivering that agenda?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess our business has always been about buying once, buying well, creating really beautiful items that are heirloom items that can be shared with your girlfriends, inherited by your daughter. A few years ago, we also had this understanding that to future-proof our business, we've had to take our sustainability journey much further. So reviewing every aspect of our business and just making better choices that are better for the planet in the best way possible, that also we can afford. Because not just technology needs to come down in price, it's also the raw materials need to come down, or the sustainable zipper needs to be more affordable that a brand like us can afford. So, or sustainable lining, that's the biggest thing that we're working on now, is how do we find lining that we don't need to buy for 5,000 pieces of leather jackets, which is something that it becomes wasteful in a way. Mm-hmm. So this technology, it's still so new. I'm still getting my head around it, but it's exciting because now we can just reduce this whole sampling process. And I think that's my biggest driver when we have new styles. if we are producing 3 to 4 new styles each collection, if we can do that as fast as possible, that makes our lives a lot easier. And that makes me as a creative director a lot easier to get to market faster. And so I think the speed is really the driver here. And then the sustainability just becomes an easy thing to do, I guess.
Got it. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed watching the two of you come through the process, and I'm very much looking forward to you both getting to your virtual fitting session so that we can see the full suite of the pilot. So thank you very much for your time today, and I hope that you're enjoying this morning. Viewers, we've had a few questions pop up on the Q&A, and I appreciate Twila and Sam jumping in and answering them as we go. If anyone has any burning questions for Ashley and Violetta, please pop them in the Q&A and I will come back to them. I now wanted to move to the next part of our session today. Our panel with this wonderful provocation is, is FashTech the key to a better future? So this morning we're going to welcome to the stage Lisa Lake. Dr. Lisa, welcome to the stage. Thank you for joining us. Lisa Lake, our sustainability expert, our academic, our fashion author, academic and researcher. And it's really interesting when we hear from brands that talk about the journey. You know, Lisa published a book called Sustainability with Style back in 2012. You know, this is not a new conversation, people, but 2022, 10 years on, just might be the right moment, and it certainly feels wonderful. For those of you who recognize Lisa, you've probably seen her speak, and she runs an incredible business and co-founded Clean Cut, Australia's Fashion Sustainability Council. She is active in academic and teaching circles, and UTS and TAFE have brought her talent together in this really wonderful role, which is the Centre of Excellence for Fashion and Sustainability and Textiles. And she is building this initiative to really support industry. So education, networking, advocacy. I'm so excited to have you join us today, Lisa. Welcome.
Thank you.
Coming to the stage this morning as well. Welcome to the stage, Clara. So great to see you today. Again, another wonderful face, friend of the AFC, and someone many of you have probably heard or spoken with. Clara is a designer. She's a consultant. She's a coach. She is bringing many of our favorite enterprise brands and emerging brands through the process of transformation and adoption. And her passion is really around transitioning to circularity and regenerative fashion. Within textiles and business practice, her future fashion agency supports independent brands, retailers, and many of us here. And you may have also been lucky to join one of her fashion academies, her future fashion academies, training fashion industry professionals on what's next. Kia ora and good morning.
Good morning.
And finally, dear Pete Smith, welcome to the stage this morning. Pete is our technology founder, CEO, and legend here from fashion tech startup Style Atlas. And Style Atlas has a mission to create technology solutions that help fashion brands become more economically and environmentally sustainable. But before his life here in this problem, he was out working with the retail industry in fashion boutiques in Regent Street, working with Harley Davidson to design a concept store. You may have had the good luck to eat at Neld Avenue restaurant, where he won a design award for hottest design in 2012. And then he decided to take on this mission of environmental design and impact, working on projects across the field of brand identity with Vision Smiths. Full circle, Pete comes to us today as the CEO of Style Atlas and as the provocateur and advocate that led to the development of FashTech Lab Connected 3D Solution. Welcome, all of you. Now, I'm not going to stop my screen share. I'm just going to open up with my questions for you all. So sustainability, hot topic, although many of us would like to say it's a new conversation, it's definitely some time in the making. And I wanted to ask you if you could share with us all just what's going on in regards to the current conversation. Where are we at? Are we moving from talking to doing? What's your perspective and your experience, Clara, when it comes to sustainability and our industry? So,
yeah, thank you. Thanks, Tracy. Look, I mean, obviously, you know, we've got what's happening globally in this space, and then what's happening here in our neck of the woods. You know, yeah, as you said, and as, you know, Lisa wrote her fantastic book in 2012, we were all veterans, Pete, Lisa and I. It feels like everything happened in 2012. Look, yeah, I mean, it's been a very ongoing conversation for over 10 years, or, you know, you could even go further back, and I have a whole kind of course on the history of sustainability in our sector. But clearly in the last, you know, not even since the pandemic, I would say in the last kind of 5 years, we've definitely seen it really increasing. And we're seeing sustainability and ESG issues increasing across all sectors, not just in ours, globally. And we all know why. There's lots of slightly urgent issues that are drawing, you know, things to our attention. So here in Australia, it is super exciting to see such engagement really ramping up. And I think that has definitely happened. I mean, I came back from the UK and I finished my PhD about 6 years ago. I would say then in the Australian industry, the conversation was only just starting. It was being very led by, you know, like, I don't know, the Baptist World Aid and the kind of advocacy groups, and the industry were not quite sure what it meant for them. So I think in the last 5 years, you know, I think here, you know, us, the brands and industry have really now kind of taken the front foot, and they're obviously all really exploring what it means. Again, if you're a small SME, it's very different to if you're one of the larger fashion brands. Obviously, you're more resourced if you're a larger brand. We're seeing a lot more sustainability managers brought into the larger brands. They're setting these wonderful corporate strategies. If you're lucky enough to be able to have that. If you're the smaller brands and some of these, you know, SMEs, they don't have the resources to have a sustainability manager, but often the founders, as we're seeing with these, you know, great case studies, the founders are often very passionate about sustainability. So they're upskilling themselves, their teams and their staff are just literally figuring it out. And as I always say with brands and organizations, sustainability, there isn't one simple answer. Obviously, there's no one solution. It's a wicked problem. But the best thing you can do is basically identify what your core values are and what it means for your context, your value chain, your market. So I think the kind of key barrier, which we will probably talk a little bit about, and I think everyone understands, is the lack of technology solutions. But I think this is why this project here that you guys have started is absolutely super exciting. You know, it's super exciting to see, because it is literally, we can't do this on our own. In the Northern Hemisphere, they've all understood this for the last 5-8 years. You know, there's multi-brand partnerships going on. There's philanthropy getting involved. There's government getting involved. So it's huge and it's complex. So I think this is one example of a project that's taking one part of a company or a brand's value chain and holding people's hand, introducing them to this new technology, trialing it, running an R&D process. And we just need to constantly be doing this essentially through all the different aspects of a business's operations. And even around circularity, which I can talk to more about. That's what we're starting to see a lot in the Northern Hemisphere, is R&D going on, funded not by the brands, because industry can't fund it themselves, but funded either by government or philanthropy to help industry test these solutions. So, yeah.
Thank you, Clara. And Lisa, does that sort of reflect where you're at and what you're seeing in regards to that progress and moment in time?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me. And I definitely would second what Clara said in terms of the timeline. When a lot of us were getting involved at 2012, I think between 2012 and 2015, it was a lot of people like myself who were coming at it from this real advocacy perspective. It was Baptist World Aid, it was Fashion Revolution, Clean Cut. We were only around for a few years, but our main goal was advocacy and education. And I think the main shift I'm starting to see that makes me most excited is that we are now having these conversations with the industry in a really hands-on way, in a way that we're seeing industry try new things and be open to try new things. Whereas earlier conversations were so focused on the consumer. And it was like, we need the consumer to do this, that, and the other. We need them to buy this. We need them to not buy so much. And of course we need the consumer to be aware. And, from my own research, I can say consumers are aware of the issues, and similar to what Ashley has found with her customers, even when they care about it, it will not be the first thing that comes to mind when they buy something. Of course it's not. We don't buy clothes for the planet. We buy clothes for a whole range of other reasons. And life is very complicated when it comes to a person's relationship with their clothes. It doesn't mean it's not important to them. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm most excited to see now we are shifting the conversation towards, great, how can the industry make these things available so that we can ask the consumer all we want, buy more sustainable clothing. If it doesn't exist, they can't buy it. If it's not available where they normally shop, they can't buy it. If they can't kind of go try it on and see if it suits their lifestyle, you kind of run into a dead end. So I'd say the conversation definitely in the last 5 years has shifted dramatically as well. I think Clara and I are very similar in our timing of when you finished your PhD. I think I was a year after you. And it really feels like a huge step change from when I was doing my research to now in terms of how many brands are engaging in these conversations. And honestly, they're having, some of the larger companies are having a hard time finding sustainability professionals to work for them who have the expertise required, which is why, everyone should enroll in Clara's wonderful academy so that they can train to get these jobs that are actually in high demand, and they can't find enough employees to fit in the slot.
Oh, I think talent is definitely something I want to talk to you about, which is for me observing, so what is the impact for Australia and our industry when it comes to knowledge creation and IP by adopting these types of digital sampling strategies locally? I mean, here we've got a cohort of Australian technology companies coming together with City of Sydney fashion businesses. What's that sort of impact on control of creative control and control for the fashion brands, but also on the skills? I'd love to get your reflection on that, Pete. The job to be done when it comes to a digital sampling solution and returning knowledge and IP to Australia.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting question. I think it's something that I've really been pleased about how we've gone through this process and connecting all of those different stakeholders, which is so important because no one person or group is going to come up with all the answers, and particularly when it comes to sustainability, because it's such, I think particularly for small businesses, well, for everybody, it's almost a minefield of information, and not all of it's straightforward, and there is this sort of almost like a knowledge gap there. So how do you, when you have the values that both Violetta and Ashley have expressed, particularly as a small business, how do you put that into place when you're trying to do everything else? And I suppose that's where we're trying to come in and be able to create practical solutions, take the learnings from people like Clara, from Lisa, and the pain points from industry, and be able to develop practical solutions for brands, but also in a way that is democratized, where it's not just, this shouldn't just be an opportunity for large brands that have the resources maybe to put in place, specific departments or sustainability office. How can we make every person with every brand a sustainability officer? I think that's what we need to work with, and we can only really do that if we collaborate together. And I think that's what's been shown, how we have these independent tech partners that have come together to develop this solution, how we've had the brands be able to, involve themselves in this, and then get the involvement from government and from education facilities like, UTS. All of that's required if we're going to really move the needle on this, which is so important.
I think we've used that phrase co-opetition, the working together, and it's interesting of seeing this growing interest in collaboration and prototyping in a way that we haven't necessarily seen previously. This program is an excellent example of people coming together in a different way, and it's a different strategy than we might have experienced. But what does it take to build a thriving community that's dedicated to making change? Lisa, what are some of your sort of advice when it comes to, many of the people on the call today have said, oh, I'd like to learn more about that, and how do I start? And so where do we begin when it comes to forming communities of change?
Yeah, I think, as Clara touched on, this program in particular is just phenomenal, this AFC FashTech program, because what you're doing is the work that needs to be done. It's bringing companies together in this pre-competitive space where we're actually open with one another about what's working, what's not working, what's really hard. And as Pete suggested, we all actually do need to work together to solve this problem. And so we need to create more spaces like this where everybody involved in the industry can come and speak openly and freely together. I don't want to just spruik the upcoming Center of Excellence, but I will say that this is an aspiration of the Center of Excellence, which is really, we're in startup phase, is what I would say, where we are hoping to create a center of sustainable fashion in Australia that is a space of networking and is a space of education, where we can have these collaborations together and work towards the solutions together. And saying that, I did see one of the questions. There are some really practical things that need to be taught if you're going to genuinely move the needle in terms of reducing your impact. And so far, I would say that the Australian fashion industry hasn't really agreed on what kind of measurement tool they would like to use. Overseas, we have a lot of brands using the Higg index or some other, that's kind of the primary index that's being used. It's not really been taken up with Australian brands in a kind of substantial way for a variety of reasons. But we do, as an industry, need to come together to decide how do we think it's best to measure our impact so that we're all on the same kind of report card and know what we're working toward together. So I think that's something that as an industry, we do need to talk about together. Clara probably has thoughts about that.
Well, I wanted to ask Clara, actually, we were talking about, we had touched briefly on returning the IP to Australia and what the impact on development of a program like this, what its likely implication is, and what some of the hurdles and barriers have been. I know that she and I have spoken extensively about the innovation ecosystem and R&D environment for Australia as a whole, not just focused on technology or fashion technology. But I would be really curious to get your perspectives, Clara, in regards to what happens when we design programs like this here in Australia. What should be the next step that would help catalyze it forward?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are some great examples overseas of how other countries do innovation quite well. And I think Australia does have a poor history or a poor background in this space. Yeah, as you said, not just in our sector, but in all sectors. The tech startup ecosystem seems, I mean, I'm not an expert in that sector, but it does seem to be really strong. Which is great. We know technology tends to get a lot of the capital and the investment. You know, I think that's great, but I think the sustainability has been kind of, up until very recently, not been as interesting, obviously, for investors. It's easier for an investor to invest in something that's obviously going to be, you know, economically good. But what we're seeing now globally in the investment space is fascinating. Like the circular economy and investment in startups and innovation around circular economy innovation is astounding. Like literally, Leonardo DiCaprio has apparently he's just invested like millions of dollars in a new startup that someone over in the US is building. I mean, that's just an example, but that just shows you the level of capital that is moving into solutions around the circular economy are astounding across all sectors. It's just mind-blowing. So this is our time here in Australia. And I was ranting with Pete and Tracy about this the other day, that Australia is in this really interesting tipping point because we kind of haven't started a kind of innovation ecosystem journey in our sector around sustainability and circularity and FashTech. But it's seriously a tipping point. So we've got this really unique opportunity to build the foundations of the pathway to what that might be. So in some ways you could say, oh, we're a bit disadvantaged because we've got a really poor history of knowing how to do innovation and how to build kind of innovation pathways and ecosystems. But if we get it right in the next kind of 5 years, it's got huge potential because we're almost starting from nothing, but we could see that blank slate as our advantage. In Europe, it's so dense. They've got so much going on. There's more money being put into innovation in our sustainability fashion space. Again, as I've been saying, coming a lot from philanthropy, coming from government. You know, EU just announced these amazing new laws around sustainable textiles, so that it's rich over there, the ecosystem, but it's dense. Whereas here, it's kind of, the space is wide open. We haven't kind of got a culture of it, but could we build that culture? So I guess that's kind of my passion. Awesome. I mean, our big issue, again, in our sector is we don't have production. We've never had textile mills. We've offshored all our garment production. So we've kind of lost the tacit skills and knowledge around manufacturing. And that obviously, you know, in Hong Kong and China, obviously that's a very different sector, but their innovation in our space is richer. And, you know, that's because they've got more capital, but they've also got a cultural history around mills, you know. Yeah. They all have family, or they all know what it's like what's involved in producing textiles. So there's kind of supply chain culture that we don't have in our country, and that's kind of our disadvantage. But we need to gear it so it suits what we're good at. We've got potential as well for end of life, for innovation around recycling of fibers and the end of life, the inner loops in the kind of circular economy. Yeah. Again, we need to kind of look at what that could be. Cotton and wool are our kind of primary raw materials. I would say our end of life, circularity, fiber recycling needs to be focusing on the cellulosics, and then we need to be designing, if we're designing, we need to be designing for those end of life solutions. So yeah, there's lots there, but it needs to be designed kind of for this systemic view. Yeah. I'm not an innovation ecosystem expert, but I know intrinsically I can see what needs to happen for us.
Can I just add briefly on to what Clara was saying? I mean, I would also say we actually have so much knowledge and expertise in Australia on what needs to happen. We do have the expertise in industry and in academia from people who have started their career in Australia and from those who have come back from working overseas. What we need, it sounds so crass, but we need investment to make it happen. And the Australian government in particular has not had sustainability as a priority. And they have certainly not had fashion as a priority for a very long time. And so that's really one of the main challenges in my own work and probably in others' work is how do we kind of lift up both of these categories that have often been put down as not important, as feminized spaces that don't really matter? How can we lift them up as, nation-changing sectors to get the investment needed to actually boost us up to the level that we can get to with the knowledge we already have here? And that's the real challenge I think we're facing.
It's certainly an exciting time, and it's one of the things where we've gone, the opening provocation is, could, FashTech be the answer? And I think one of the questions I have for you all as we head towards close today is, what are your perspectives on the connected sampling solution, and how does it stack up when we talk about lessening the impact of our industry? Love to hear your perspectives. Are we on the right journey? Connected 3D solution, what do we think? Lisa, I'd love your closing thoughts.
Yes, I think I just will reflect back on Ashley's brilliant commentary during her presentation. I would love to see more of that kind of measurement of exactly what has been saved, because there's no doubt that we're saving textiles when we move to digital sampling. Of course, it's an amazing opportunity to reduce materials. And the researcher in me wants us to collect that data now so that we can use that to make it more widespread.
Well, I'm looking forward to being able to give you an update on a pilot program we're hoping that we'll be able to introduce towards the end of the year, driving an industry measurement conversation. Clara, your critical eyes on what we've created and proposed in our journey so far. I mean, gosh, honestly, we're a handful of months in, but tech is like dog years, so we're galloping forward.
You have done so well. It is so impressive. I love the collaboration, and you can just see the meaningful, and I can even see with Violetta and Ashley, it's just so, it feels so good to be supported, doesn't it? When you're going through, and Violetta, I think you said, it's like operational change, but it's also mindset change. And when you're running a small business, you don't have the time, and you can't really validate that, oh gosh, like I didn't learn in my education to be a fashion designer how to digitize this stage of the process. And so this is a huge mindset shift. So I think it's great. Obviously I can see it. You feel supported. You feel kind of cared for. And I think the camaraderie of the collaboration, I think all of the amazing solution providers, again, you're being validated for what you guys are all have been working so hard to create. I think Layla and everyone at the AFC it's very exciting what the AFC, I think what's going to come in the next few years for them. I know Layla's got some really big visions, and as Lisa talked to, this kind of idea of government really understanding the value of not only our sector, but of sustainability within that sector is very exciting.
Wonderful. So thank you for your awesome words and your wonderful support. And I'm going to give Pete the last breath, because I know we're already on the hour, and I want to acknowledge some of the questions in the chat. Pete, how are you feeling at this point?
Yeah, look, I'm really very excited about it. We went into this as like we came together with a solution, but a solution that needed to be tested, and having the way that the engagement by the different brands, different tech partners, how we've worked together and collaborated together. I do something that I think is is really important in this space, particularly when we're talking about both economic and environmental sustainability. Every fashion brand, it's a pain point for sampling, and it's often overlooked. We look at the consumer, we look at other things like that. But when we talk about sustainability, you know, one of the answers people talk about is we need to make less clothes. But how about we start off with making less clothes that people are not actually going to wear? And that's the case with sampling. If we can drastically reduce that and have a situation where the clothes that people that are made are worn by more people, then I think we're on a great start.
We're on a great start. I like that. That's a wonderful last point. Can FashTech be the answer? We're on a great start. And I wanted to thank you all for the journey. I also wanted to acknowledge all of the awesome questions that have been coming through. Pardon me that we haven't had a chance to touch on many of them. Hopefully you get a sense of our perspective. What we'll be doing, as we've done after each knowledge exchange, is take all your awesome Q&A questions, and we'll provide everyone on the panel today with the opportunity to lean in and answer, and we'll share that out on our update of newsletter, where you can also watch the post record of today's live stream. Thank you all for being here today. Thanks to our panelists, thanks to our fashion brands, thanks for sharing so generously. Keep your eyes peeled for our final knowledge exchange in early June. I'm very, very excited. Today, sustainability is right in my wheelhouse, but in June, we move into the next stage, which is what does sustainable selling look like? And you're going to hear from AFC partners Ord and tech brand Nuno. Watch out for them. Incredible Australian scaling NFT platform. We're going to be hearing from Nat, one incredible host and founder of that business. Look forward to seeing you all in a month's time. Thank you very much for your wonderful support, and have an amazing fashion week coming up to all the brands who are showing. See you soon. Ka kite. Thank you.